In 2010, Barnet Council published this graph. It's a simple projection of how the council's budgets will be squeezed by two things: the rising demand for care services and falling grant from central government. It is a projection, not a prediction. For instance, the council will be failing to run several statutory services in 2025 if this came true. But as a projection, it received national coverage as the clearest expression of the financial challenge facing local government, and became known colloquially as the Barnet Graph of Doom. The gap between the spending on adults and children's services and the overall budget is the money left to spend on all other services provided by the council, services such as libraries, rubbish collections and recycling, road maintenance, street cleaning and parks. Since the graph was published, several things have changed, and this short animation explains how. Firstly, the good news. The council has already made budget savings. 70% of these savings have come through greater efficiency, doing the same for less. Savings on our adults and children's services have reduced the key bars and delayed the point they take up all spending. The council has entered into two key contracts. A contract to outsource back-office services such as HR and finance, along with the council's call centre, to the company Capita, who now provide these services at a lower cost. These used to take up 11% of the council's budget. They now take up 8%. This will save the taxpayer £12.5 million for each of the 10 years the contract runs. The council has also set up RE, a joint-owned venture, to run our development, regulatory and planning departments as a traded business. This will be worth £4 million each year through savings and guaranteed income. Investment in our waste and recycling services has already seen the council almost double the amount of recycling we collect. These changes will also save the council nearly £2 million a year through less waste being sent to landfill. Barnet will also benefit from an increased local council tax base. Like most of London, the population of the borough is likely to increase over the next decade. London's overall population is growing. 350,000 people now live in Barnet, an increase of around 40,000 people since the start of the decade. The borough's population is predicted to be 390,000 by 2020. As most of these new residents will be of working age, they will bring in more income to the council. This graph of boom moves the spending challenge slightly further back. Now, however, for the bad news. While the original graph saw the income from central government drop rapidly from 2010 to 2014, it assumed that stayed constant after that. This is no longer expected to be the case. Although the UK economy is now growing, the country still has a budget deficit. The gap between the total amount collected through tax and the total amount spent on services is over £80 billion, and all three major political parties are talking of further cuts in public spending after the next election. It is clear we are now in the middle of a decade of austerity, with no likelihood of a major increase in council spending at the end of the decade. To add to the bad news, this graph is presented in cash terms. While the council's income will suffer in absolute terms, inflation eats into the council's spending power. By the end of the decade, the council will have roughly half the spending power it had in 2010. The council in 2020 will have to be a very different body from the council of 2010. The council has now launched a review of what the priorities should be for a smaller council and how we help to keep Barnet a prosperous and successful borough. We are also looking at where we can make further savings to our budget.